Who do you need to beat the highest level Magma Dragon in the hard Doom Tower? Login champs only. What is going on, Raiders? Soda Dragon here, and today I got for you a 100% free team that can help you beat the highest, hardest Magma Dragon in the hard Doom Tower. Not normal, hard Doom Tower. And the cool thing about this team is that it is 100% free. That is, it is only composed of login champs, and you do not have to pull any shards for these guys. You don't have to be lucky at all. If you log in and play the game, you will eventually get these champs. So the way this comp is right now, you will need to manual the run, but think about it, you only have to do it once. The idea that you can use only login champs and get through the hardest Magma Dragon in Doom Tower is pretty good, right? Even if it's a manual run. Plus, if you get lucky with certain legendary champs, which I'll talk about later, you can turn this team into a full auto team. So first, we'll talk about Kuldath's skills, and then we'll talk about the team, their gear, and masteries. Let's start with Kuldath's A1, Brand with Weakness. Attacks one enemy. Decreases the target's turn meter by 50%. Will target enemies under hex debuffs. Damage based on attack. So this is a single target attack, and we'll talk about hexes later, but basically anyone under a hex debuff will be hit really hard by Kuldath. So we definitely want to prevent anyone from being hexed. On to Kuldath's A2, Overburn. Attacks all enemies. Instantly activates any HP burn debuffs on each target and decreases the duration of those HP burn debuffs by 1 turn. Damage based on attack. This is on a 3-turn cooldown. So this is very similar to Sissy's skill, in which she can activate all the HP burns on all the enemies. Unfortunately, this is going against our team when we have HP burn debuffs on, which he does apply with his A3. So for each HP burn debuff, when it's activated, that is 3% damage. So take a team of 5. If everyone has HP burn, that is 15% damage that everybody is taking. So we definitely want to prevent not only the HP burns on our team, but the activation of it as well. On to Kuldath's A3, Stoke the Flames. Attacks all enemies. Places a HP burn debuff for 3 turns, then steals 10% of the turn meter from each enemy under an HP burn debuff. Also places a hex debuff for 4 turns on the enemy with the lowest HP. This debuff cannot be resisted or blocked. Damage based on attack on a 3-turn cooldown. So the HP burn can be blocked and it can be resisted, but the hex cannot. So that hex is going to be the real problem, which we'll talk about next. But the HP burn, if you're unfortunate enough to get it on your team, it can be cleansed away or just straight up resisted with enough resistance on your characters. But that hex is going to be the problem, so we'll talk about that next. On to Kuldath's first passive, Lethal Lava. Instantly places a hex debuff for 4 turns on an enemy whenever they remove a hex debuff from themselves or an ally. Will ignore block damage, shield, and unkillable buffs, and will ignore 100% of defense when attacking enemies under hex debuffs. Instantly removes any HP burn debuffs placed on Kuldath the Magma Dragon and replaces them with a 15% continuous heal for 2 turns. So firstly, because of this passive, we cannot use Drexthar. I know he is an MVP of the Doom Tower, and I know you guys are using him for a ton of bosses, and you should be, he's awesome. But for the Magma Dragon, he's horrible. He is gonna keep on healing the Magma Dragon when the Magma Dragon transforms those HP burns into continuous heals. So leave Drexthar off your team. Secondly, in case someone does have that hex debuff on your team, there is only one way to mitigate the damage that he's going to take. Because notice, Kuldath will ignore block damage, shield, unkillable and 100% of defense. But Kuldath will not ignore ally protection. So if someone is under a hex debuff on your team, make sure you protect them with that ally protection and at least mitigate some of that massive damage that they will be taking. So lastly, let's talk about removing the hex. So cleansers really aren't your best option for this boss and for dealing with hexes. Why? Because when someone tries to cleanse the hex, the cleanser themselves will get hexed, so that hex will transfer to them. Not only that, but the expiration time on that hex will be refreshed. So maybe there was only 2 turns left on a certain champion for that hex, but when you try to cleanse it, not only will that hex transfer to the cleanser, but now it's back to a 4-turn cooldown. And think about people like Doom Priest, who have an automatic cleanse at the start of their turn. What's going to happen? Well, the first time they're going to get that hex debuff and it's going to be on a 4-turn cooldown now, however low it was before, and every time she takes a turn, that is going to be refreshed, so it's going to be infinitely there. So cleansing strategies wouldn't be your best bet against Kuldath and against the hex. Now, can you use Doom Priest? Sure, as long as you don't get hexed and as long as you don't get hit while under a hex. Okay, so our strategy is going to be to completely avoid the hex in the first place. So if you're using a similar strategy, it's fine to use a cleanser or somebody like Doom Priest. And even if someone does get the hex, the big thing is don't let them get hit, okay? So anybody under the hex, make sure not to let them get hit. On to Kuldath's second passive, Invincible Scales. Immune to stun, freeze, sleep, hex, block active skills, block passive skills, fear, true fear, and decreased speed debuffs. Also immune to HP exchange effects, HP balancing effects, cooldown increasing effects, and turn meter reduction effects. So basically what this means is that we cannot stop Kuldath from using his skills, freely taking his turns, and we cannot even slow Kuldath down. On to Kuldath's last passive, Almighty Strength. Damage from skills that scale based on enemy max HP cannot exceed 10% of the boss's max HP when attacking the boss. So your champs like Royal Guard, Septimus, and Coldheart cannot take more than 10% of the boss's HP in a single attack. So how do we deal with Kuldath? Well, notice here on his second passive, out of all the debuffs he is immune to, he is not immune to provoke. So that is going to be the strategy to control Kuldath, to make sure he does not hex anybody, and to make sure we know who he is going to target. We are going to continuously provoke him. That means we need 100% uptime on provoke on Kuldath. So our champs are going to utilize that strategy to beat Kuldath. Alright guys, on to the champs, starting with the MVP of this composition. The one indispensable character, Jizoh. You heard me right. Seriously, it's Jizoh, okay? I've always maintained Jizoh is a great champ. I know a lot of people overlook him, maybe because of how early you get him. But as far as 100% free-to-play login champ only, if you want to beat Kuldath, you have to use Jizoh, okay? And we'll talk about why he is so important to this comp, why he is indispensable. So why Jizoh? Here's why. On his A3 Ryle, he has a really cool 2-turn provoke. And you know, if you get him early game, you might not realize how important this is. And there are a ton of people that now have that AoE provoke. Okay, so you might think, well, that's so much better. Sure, if there are multiple people you need to provoke, AoE provoke is nice. But what about one person, right? All we need is that single target. And Jizoh is that free login champ, defense-based, tough dude that has a 2-turn provoke. Okay, so amazing. Now make sure you book it down so it's a 4-turn cooldown. But the cool thing is he has another skill here, Fierce Protector, that grants him an extra turn. So when we use Fierce Protector after Ryle, basically this 2-turn provoke is on a 3-turn cooldown, which is just awesome. And you know, Ryle, basically it gives you a counterattack and a shield buff, and you can put it on Jizoh himself. It does waste a turn of it because he gets an extra turn after casting it, but still, it's fine to put it on Jizoh himself. The big deal is he gets an extra turn after using Fierce Protector, which lowers the cooldown of that provoke. Remember, booked, it's going to be 4 turns. After Fierce Protector, it's going to be 3 turns. So once again, we can really utilize that provoke to its maximum because we can reduce those cooldowns. So Ryle here is the only skill that you need to have completely booked out. So use as many books as you have to get this A3 skill of Jizoh's booked. So are there any substitutions for Jizoh? Sure. If you happen to get lucky enough with your legendaries, Black Knight is a great sub-in for Jizoh. Why? Because on his A1, he has a 75% chance to provoke. Super high, all right? And if you get the Fearsome Presence Mastery, that's going to be 80% chance just on his A1 to provoke. So he would be a great substitute for Jizoh. But an even crazier substitute would be War Chief. All right, War Chief is hands down the king of the Magma Dragon. Here's why. Not only does he have a provoke on his A1, and you can increase the chances of this as well, but he has a 100% chance provoke on his A3, which is a 3-turn provoke, which can be booked down to 3-turn cooldown. 3-turn provoke with a 3-turn cooldown. Just insane. So really, War Chief, if you have him, he is going to be the guy that can turn this comp into a 100% full auto comp. All right. If you don't have War Chief, I would not recommend trying to go full auto, because chances are the different people that have provokes on your team, and we'll talk about a secondary provoker in a second, they won't be cycling their provokes correctly unless it's on their A1. And even someone like Black Knight, unless you program in his skills, he's going to use his other skills as well. So he won't always be using his A1. So that means there might be some times when you need him to provoke Kuldath that he doesn't, because maybe he's using Lowered Visor to heal everybody and to put that defense up. Now, once again, you can program him with the champion skills to just use his A1. But definitely War Chief is going to be your #1 choice for beating this guy full auto if you're lucky enough to get him. But back to the star of the show, Jizoh. So how have I geared him? Here I have him in an Immortal set and a Relentless set. So that Immortal set gives plus 15% HP and 3% healing every turn. Relentless, we have an 18% chance to get an extra turn. So when we proc those extra turns, not only do we get the healing from the Immortal set, but all the cooldowns of his skills, they get reduced by 1. And what are we looking at? Really, that provoke is what we want. So remember, 2-turn provoke on a 4-turn cooldown when booked. If we use the A2 after, because of that extra turn, that provoke is on a 3-turn cooldown, which we will get most of the time. The turns are not completely synced, but we'll get it most of the time. Plus, if we get those extra procs with Relentless, now we can potentially get that provoke, 2-turn provoke, to a 2-turn cooldown. And sometimes 1-turn cooldown. Not like we'll need it, but if Relentless procs a lot, then that's going to lower the cooldowns a ton. So this is a great way to build Jizoh, especially for this boss, because really we need him for his provoke, and we need those cooldowns to be low. All right, so Relentless is definitely a good choice for Jizoh. The awesome thing is, because Jizoh is Spirit and the boss is Force, that Jizoh will be taking a lot of weak hits. All right, which is just awesome. Not only is he a defense-based champ, period, so he's tanky, but the boss will be weak hitting him a lot, okay? That's why it's not necessary to build Jizoh with, for example, all defense sets or all HP sets and build them ridiculously tanky, because the boss is already having a hard enough time taking down Jizoh's health because of that affinity matchup. So for those bottom pieces, we do have tankier options here. So we do have an HP percentage glove. Once again, we're looking at that survivability and that tankiness. We don't need Jizoh to do a lot of damage. We just need him to keep up that provoke. And we also have him in a defense percentage chest. So both HP percentage for the glove and the chest would be fine, or HP percentage and defense percentage. Worst case scenario, both defense percentage. It's probably not going to do as well because of the max HP healing not only he's getting from his immortal set, but also from Scyl of the Drakes. So she's healing everybody by 10% of their max HP every turn. So the more max HP Jizoh has, the more he heals. So prioritize HP percentage, chest piece, and glove. Now, as far as the boot, it's going to need to be speed. Jizoh needs to take his turns. Okay. Now, even a floor 100 of the Magma Dragon Doom Tower Hard, he's not that fast. The Magma Dragon is under 200 speed. Plus, we're going to have that speed boost as well from our speed lead. So that's going to help out a lot with the speed, but don't run Jizoh here in something like a defense percentage boot or an HP percentage boot. He's going to be too slow. So make sure you put a speed boot on Jizoh. Lastly, because we are using Jizoh for his provoke debuff, you're going to need to build him with accuracy. So here, you're going to need to run an accuracy banner. So once again, make sure you run an accuracy banner on your Jizoh for the Magma Dragon. If you still don't have enough accuracy, which should be over 300, optimally 350-ish if you can get it that high, then you might need to switch out the chest piece for an accuracy chest piece. On to Jizoh's total stats. Now, I do not have him in insane gear. Okay, it is not insane gear. That means these numbers should be attainable for you guys. And it's probably possible to beat Kuldath with weaker gear and weaker stats than this. But this is what I have, right? So we have 4,800 at health, not too bad. Would be higher with a HP percentage chest instead of that defense percentage chest. Attacks not relevant. Defense pretty good at 4,000. We have speed 200. So Kuldath at floor 100 Hard Doom Tower is at 175 speed. So as I mentioned, Kuldath is not too fast. Nevertheless, make sure your Jizoh is faster. Okay, you never want any boss to lap you. Okay. Next, we have crit rate and crit damage, which is not really relevant to us because those basic skills aren't doing the damage. So the damage from Jizoh and from everybody else primarily is going to come by way of that War Master Mastery. Okay, so and that's not affected by crit rate, crit damage, anything like that. Okay, that's based off enemy max HP. So we actually don't have to build Jizoh with crit rate, crit damage. We don't even have to build him with high defense for the sake of doing damage. Okay, if you want your Jizoh to do a lot of damage, that's fine. Yeah, you have to build him with a lot of defense. But for us, it's unnecessary because the damage is coming from those War Master procs, and those are unaffected by crit rate, crit damage, and that damage multiplier, whatever happens to be on whatever champ. For Jizoh, it's defense. Okay, so we don't need crit rate, crit damage. Resistance, we don't need either because we are completely bypassing not only the HP burn, but the hex. So we don't need any resistance. And not like it would matter on the hex anyway because it's not resistible. But anyways, we don't need to worry about that. But we do need to worry about accuracy. So at that stage 100 Hard Doom Tower, Kuldath has 330 resistance. Now you see my accuracy is 326, so it's really close. Would it be better to be higher? Yes, it would be. But most of the time this is actually okay, and you'll see this will probably work the vast majority of the times I need it to work. But even if my accuracy was higher, there is still that 3% fail rate for debuffs. There's always a 3% fail rate, always. That's why I mentioned earlier, it's important that you have a backup provoker, okay? So even if you have that top tier provoker, as I mentioned, War Chief, 3-turn provoke on a 3-turn cooldown, still, there's a 3% failure rate, even with the right accuracy. So make sure you have a backup provoker, and we'll talk about ours in a second. But 326, not the best, but it's okay. The vast majority of the time that I try to provoke Kuldath, even on this highest, hardest level, Jizoh will provoke. So it's okay for our purposes. All right, guys, let's go over the masteries. Now, you guys feel free to just copy this completely. Since this isn't a champion spotlight, I'm not going to go through every single mastery, but I'm just going to highlight a few. So big deal here is War Master. So this is how we're getting the majority of the damage out of our characters for fighting against Kuldath. So basically, we have a 60% chance per attack to do bonus damage, and this bonus damage is based off enemy max HP. So like those Cold Hearts, Royal Guards, Septimus, skills based off enemy max HP. This is a version of that. It's like a baby version, but still it hits super hard, and this can be put on any character. Okay, and the cool thing about this is the damage is based off who is being hit, not the hitter. Okay, so as I mentioned with Jizoh, it doesn't matter what his crit rate, crit damage is, his defense, Jizoh's damage is based on defense, but it doesn't matter what it is because it doesn't matter on the hitter. The damage is based on off who is being hit, and it's Kuldath, and Kuldath has a ton of HP. So when War Master procs, it hits really hard. And when we have 5 characters on our team, all with War Master, that's really, we're gonna see the majority of our damage. So War Master is a really good one. I'd say necessary. Can you do it without War Master? Sure, but the run is gonna be much longer because you're missing that big majority chunk of your damage. Next, Life Drinker works really well with War Master. So especially when War Master procs and we get that big chunk of bonus damage, Life Drinker, at least if we're under 50% HP, allows us to get a portion of that back as healing. Now for normal attacks, it doesn't end up being that much, but when War Master procs, it's a really good chunk. Next, we have Lasting Gifts. This is just optional as well for Jizoh, but this allows his counterattack and shield buff to extend to potentially 3 turns instead of 2 turns. Not really necessary. And lastly, we have Spirit Haste, increases speed by 8 for each dead ally. Once again, not really necessary. If you're doing the run correctly, nobody should die. All right, so we won't really need to resurrect anybody, once again, if you're doing the run correctly. All right, guys, on to our next champ, and that is High Khatun. So really why we're using her firstly is because of the speed aura, 19% in all battles, and this is an all ally speed buff. This is just insane that this speed aura is on a login champ. So this speed aura that you see, it is exactly the same as in my Duchess Lilitu. Okay, exactly the same. So you are getting really a legendary quality aura in a login champ. So use it. Once again, this is just to make sure we're running fast. Plus we have this A2, which increases turn meter and puts up that increased speed buff on the whole team. So this is really why we're using her, for her aura and for her A2. Now, unfortunately, the A1, which has a decreased speed debuff, does not work on Kuldath. So it's not really going to be the reason we're running her. Plus, her A3 as well, the turn meter decrease, does not work on Kuldath. So once again, we're using High Khatun for her aura, 19% in all battles, all allies, super good. Plus we're using her for turn meter boosting and that increased speed buff for all allies. So do you have to book out your High Khatun to use her for this comp? I would say no, but if you have the epic books to spare, definitely try to book out this Rally the Horde. Hopefully you'll get lucky and you put one book in her and you're done. is she worth booking in general completely? I would say yes. Definitely, as far as general content, I do think she's worth it. But her most important skill is the one here, Rally the Horde. So if you get lucky and that's your first book you put into her, feel free to use your books elsewhere because this is really her most important skill that needs to be booked. But even this, you don't need to for this comp. So if you're really free to play, low on epic books, don't feel the need that you have to book her out for this comp. Now, should she be 6-star level 60? Yes, because you want to be able to use that War Master mastery. So that's going to require that she's 6-star. So definitely 6-star her, but she does not have to be booked to use her with this comp. So how have I geared her? So you see here I have her in 2 speed sets and an accuracy set. So the speed sets plus 12% speed calculated off that character's base speed. So here High Khatun 104, that's how we calculate it, 12% of 104. I have 2 sets of that plus 1 accuracy set, so plus 40 accuracy. Now really that's for her A1 and her A3. So on her A1 she has that decreased speed debuff, and on her A3 she has that AOE turn meter decrease. Now both are not relevant to Kuldath. That's why I didn't bother to pump up her accuracy too high. She basically doesn't need any accuracy for this fight because we're not using her for debuffs. We're using her for buffs, and buffs don't need accuracy, right? She just needs to be fast. She should be the fastest person on your team. Other good options are lifesteal sets. If you want to put a lifesteal set on her with a speed set, that's fine as long as you have the right speeds. Once again, she should be the fastest person on your team and to be able to get in front of everybody and utilize that increased speed buff. So with those bottom pieces of gear, basically we're looking for tankiness, so we're looking for HP percentage or defense percentage. So for the glove, which is not even maxed out, it still works. We have a defense percentage glove. So for the chest, we have a HP percentage chest. And lastly, for that boot, we're gonna have that speed boot. Once again, we wanna make sure everyone is at least faster than Kuldath. So High Khatun helps with that turn meter boost and that speed increase buff, but at base level, make sure your characters aren't too slow. So for her accessories, make sure for the banner, if you're going to use her for general content and you want to use her for her debuffs, that you put an accuracy banner on her. You see, I don't have one because right now for this boss, I am not using her for her debuffs. So I have an attack banner with some HP and defense percent. But really, the HP and defense percent are why I'm using this banner. It's not necessarily for the attack. So just getting a little bit of tankiness out of that banner. If you have speed on the banner, that's all the better. But once again, for general content, put an accuracy banner on her. If we're talking Kuldath, it doesn't matter because we're not using her for her debuffs. On to High Khatun's total stats. So here we have her at 49,000 health, which is pretty good. Okay, attack, her damage is based on attack, but once again, for Kuldath and a lot of the bosses, primarily how you do damage is through those War Master or Giant Slayer procs. So we're not too concerned about her attack right now. Defense 2700, not bad. Speed 224. So for some of you, you might be saying that's not that fast. Yeah, it's not. You don't need to be that fast for this boss. The boss is not fast. You just need to know how to deal with him and the strategy in particular. But do we want to stay faster than this boss? Yes, we don't want the boss to outspeed us. But this is not a speed race with this boss. We're not beating this boss through speed necessarily. We just want to make sure we're a little bit faster. And 224 is fine for this comp. Crit rate, crit damage, we're not too concerned about. Debuff resistance, as I mentioned, we are bypassing all those debuffs, so we're not too concerned about it. And accuracy, we're not concerned about as well. All we need High Khatun to do is to be in that lead spot for that speed aura in all battles and do her turn meter boost and speed increase buff. That's it. So we don't need debuff accuracy or debuff resistance. On to High Khatun's Masteries. So I'm just going to highlight a few of them, the most important ones. So firstly is War Master. Remember, all our characters have War Master. That is how we're doing the majority of our damage to Kuldath. So that's like that baby version of the enemy max HP skill that Cold Heart, Septimus, Royal Guard have, etc. So definitely everybody gets War Master. Remember, Life Drinker works really well with War Master to get us that bonus healing when we are under 50% health. And really, this shouldn't be proccing that much. Sometimes useful, but not really, because only our provoker characters may get under 50% health. And Jizoh, it's not likely, so it's going to be our other provoker character, which we'll talk about soon. But this is definitely helpful in general. Next, we have Lasting Gifts. This is really important because Khatun puts up that increased speed buff, and it's for 2 turns, but with Lasting Gifts, it's potentially 3 turns. Now, we don't need everybody in our comp to be fully synced. We don't have a specific turn order. It's not like an unkillable comp for Clan Boss where everyone has a specific order, and if people are out of order, it throws everything off. It's not like that, all right? We just need everybody to be fast. So this potentially increases that speed increase buff to 3 turns instead of 2 turns. So if some people on our team get it for 3 turns and other people only get it for 2, that's okay. Once again, no specific turn order in our comp. All we need to do is be faster than the boss. Next, we have Master Hexer here. This is pretty good for your general PvE content with Khatun because she has that speed decrease debuff on her A1. And that is a really good debuff for a lot of bosses in this game. For PvP, it's not super useful. And for this boss, unfortunately, it's not useful at all. He's immune to it. But Master Hexer is a good choice for her in general when you fight those other bosses that can have that speed decrease debuff applied to them. Alright guys, on to our next champion in the comp, Grush the Rush. So I recently did a champion spotlight on him, so if you want to know the details of that, you want to get into the nitty gritty, I will leave a link in the description below so you guys can check that out. So how does Grush help us out in this comp? Well, his A3 brings those big version continuous heals for us, plus if you build him with crit rate, he has that smaller version continuous heal as well. So he's healing up the team with that A3. Notice it's on a 6-turn cooldown unbooked. With books, it's on a 4-turn cooldown. Here we have his A2 Bonebreaker Stomp. It either applies a decreased attack debuff or a decreased crit damage debuff. Now with this skill, it's either one or the other. So for any one use of this skill, you're going to get either one or the other. Decreased attack is probably a little bit better when you get that decreased crit damage. In PvE content, bosses don't crit that much, okay? Just in general, the crit rate isn't super high. Now, if we're talking Grithian the Griffin with 20 Sky Bonds, yeah, his crit rate's pretty high. So he's gonna crit a lot. But in general, for PvE content, enemies are not critting that much against you. So that decreased crit damage isn't as important or isn't as useful as that decreased attack debuff. But with the skill, you can't choose. In any case, you get it down to a 4-turn cooldown from a 5-turn cooldown when you book it out. And we get extra healing from that A1, so Grush can apply a leech debuff with his A1, which is just awesome. So you see in terms of survivability, so with the healing from those continuous heals and the leech, plus making Kuldath do less damage with that A2, Grush is really helping us survive. So do you need to book out your Grush to use him in this comp? I would say it's not completely necessary, but it helps out a lot. Yes, Grush does have that leech on the A1, but if you want those continuous heals and you want those debuffs, the decreased attack and decreased crit damage on reasonable cooldowns, not 6 and 5 turn, we're talking 4 and 4, then definitely you do want to book out your Grush. So in general, is he worth booking out? Yes, especially for free-to-play players. He is a great champ. He is worth the books. But is it completely necessary for this comp to book him out? Probably not, depending on your gear. So if you have the books to spare, I would say book him out. If you don't, it's okay. You'll probably be okay. So what about Grush's gear? So here I have him in a lifesteal and perception set. So lifesteal allows 30% of the damage dealt to be returned back as health, which is great, especially in conjunction with War Master. When War Master procs and you get those big bonus damage numbers, lifesteal works with it, which is really cool. You get a huge chunk of healing back. Plus we have perception, accuracy plus 40, speed plus 5%. We do need accuracy because we are using Grush for his debuffs along with his buffs. But yes, those debuffs do need accuracy because Grush's debuffs can be resisted. They are not irresistible, so we do need accuracy. So therefore, we're going to need to build him with accuracy. Perception set is a good way to go. Accuracy set would work good as well. So what about those bottom pieces of gear? So here for the glove, we have an HP percentage glove. So really, we're focused here on Grush's survivability. If you really wanted that small version continuous heal from his A3, you would put a crit rate glove here, or just make sure his crit rate is really high from his substats. If your Grush is not as tanky, or you're having trouble with your Grush dying sometimes, then go ahead and put an HP or defense percentage glove on Grush instead of that crit rate glove. Next for the chest, we have an HP percentage chest. Once again, for survivability, you have some good speed rolls there as well. And lastly, for the boot, I have a speed boot. Once again, we want to be faster than the boss. It's not hard with Kuldath. He is not fast and his speed does not increase. He does get turn meter boosts sometimes, but his speed doesn't increase. So once again, really reasonable speeds to be faster than Kuldath. So as far as the accessories, make sure you put an accuracy banner on your Grush. 6-star would be better. I just don't have it, but I also have some good speed in this banner. So really that's what you're looking for your Grush. Chances are you will be using him for his debuffs, his A2. So make sure you put that accuracy banner on your Grush. Best case scenario, you got some speed in that banner. On to Grush's total stats. So here we have health at 58,000, so good amount of health with that HP percentage glove and the HP percentage chest. Attack, not relevant. Defense, pretty good number at 3,000. Speed 195, so he's not particularly fast, but is he faster than Kuldath? Yes. And Kuldath will not be taking our turn meter because we will not allow him to put HP burns on us. So that's 20 higher than the boss, which is just fine. Crit rate 57%, not too bad. So when he does do that A3 and crit sometimes, he will apply that extra small version continuous heal to the team, which is good. Like I said, you can build them with high crit rate if you want to ensure that that A3 applies that extra continuous heal on the team. Either way is okay. Crit damage, not too important to us. Debuff resistance, not important to us. And lastly, debuff accuracy. So the resistance of Kuldath, as I mentioned, is 330. Now 315 accuracy does work most of the time. So most of the time those debuffs will land. So that leech, that attack down, and that crit damage down will land. Would it be better with higher accuracy? Yes. So once I get that 6-star banner, I will be putting it on Grush. But for our purposes, it lands most of the time. And those debuffs with that A3, we don't need accuracy at all. So definitely, if you can, try to match the resistance of the boss, which is 330. But even this right here, most of the time those debuffs land. So here, the masteries for Grush are the exact same as High Khatun, and they work pretty well for this boss. So once again, War Master, we're going to have that on everybody. We want that bonus damage. Life Drinker, just in case someone falls under 50% health, they get that bonus healing. Lasting Gifts, super good for Grush when he applies those continuous heals. So instead of 2 continuous heals, it could potentially be 3, or instead of 1, it could potentially be 2. So really, really good for Grush to get Lasting Gifts. And lastly, Master Hexer for that leech and for that attack down and crit damage down. So super good debuff extender potentially. So get Master Hexer just to extend out those debuffs, because his A2, the cooldown is a bit long at a 4-turn cooldown when booked. So this definitely helps with that. Alright guys, on to Scyl of the Drakes. So the primary reason we're using her, that A2 is really helpful, so she has an AoE stun. This is helpful for the waves, but it's really her passive here. So at the start of every turn, she's going to heal everybody on the team for 10% of their max health. So really, this is a big reason for using her. If we do the comp correctly, we shouldn't have anyone dying, but we do have her as a backup just in case. So we have Phoenix right. In case we do need to revive somebody, she can. But if we do this right, and this is a manual run, but if we do this right, no one should die. So basically, she's going to be healing people. That is the main thing that she's doing just by taking her turns, which is awesome. Now, she does have a decreased speed on her A1, but the boss is immune to that. So that's not really going to be helpful to us. And also, we cannot decrease the boss's turn meter. So she also has that decreased turn meter on her A1. Once again, not useful for Kuldath. So once again, her main role here is that backup reviver just in case. She has a nice AoE stun on her A2 for the waves, but really it's her passive. So once again, 10% healing for everybody just when she takes a turn. Okay, so especially the provokers, this is really important to keep them alive, to get that bonus healing, not only from Grush with those continuous heals, but from Scyl here, just by Scyl taking a turn with her passive. So do you need to book out your Scyl of the Drakes for this comp? And the answer is no, because we're primarily using her for this passive Boundless Life. And notice it's not affected by books. You can't increase it with books. It just works as is once you get her immediately. So no, you don't need to book her. She works just fine without books for this comp. Now, is she worth it to book in general? Yes, especially if she's your only reviver. So her revive here, notice it's on a 6-turn cooldown and it's a single target revive. So this is really long for a single target revive. So if she's your only reviver and you can spare the books, she's absolutely worth it. But if you don't have any books to spare and you just got her, can you use her for this comp? Yes, 100%. She'll work just fine. So how have I geared her? So I switch around her gear a lot depending on what I'm using her for and what I'm experimenting with. But here I have her in a regeneration set and an immortal set. So that regen set gives me 15% HP every turn. So she's going to be healing herself for 15% HP plus 10% HP from that passive. So that's 25% HP she's getting just at the start of her turn, which is pretty cool. And notice she doesn't have to be freely taking her turn. She can be stunned, she can be slept, she can be feared, but at the start of that turn, whether or not she can freely take it or not, she's gonna heal not only with her passive but with these sets as well. So the regen plus 15% at the start of each turn, plus the immortal plus 3% on top of that. So we're getting a lot of healing, 28% healing just at the start of every turn. All right, so this is really good. Plus that immortal gives us plus 15% health. So this is in general a super tanky build for your Scyl. Another really good choice would be a relentless set. You know, it's a toss-up which is better. It really depends on the quality of gear you have. If you have really good relentless gear with a lot of HP and speed rolls, then that would probably be better. Because when she takes an extra turn, not only is she healing herself again, but she's healing everybody else. All right, so either this type of setup for just a super tanky Scyl, or if you want a Scyl that benefits the team a little bit more, then you would put a relentless set on her and maybe an immortal set on top of that. So those are two really good viable options for Scyl when using her in the Doom Tower to fight these bosses. So what about those bottom pieces of gear? So here I have her in an HP percentage glove. So the chest is an HP percentage chest. And lastly, that boot is a speed boot. So she does need to take her turns to proc that healing, okay? Not only for everybody with her passive, but for herself with these gear sets. So make sure you gear your Scyl with speed. She does need to take turns to heal everybody and herself with these gear sets. So what about the accessories? So here I have my Scyl in a resistance banner. Now for general content, I would say go with an accuracy banner because Scyl has a ton of debuffs, right? She has that turn meter decrease, she has that decreased speed debuff, also she has that AoE stun debuff. So in general, put an accuracy banner on her. I have her in the resistance banner because I got that nice triple roll on defense. I got some speed on it. And for this boss, she's not going to be applying any of those debuffs. So really for Kuldath in particular, whatever banner is going to make her tankier, go ahead and choose that. But if we're talking about general content, PvE content, even PvP, your best bet would be to put an accuracy banner on her. On to Scyl's total stats. So here we have her at 75,000 health. Attack we're not too concerned about, but defense 2600, not too bad. Speed 203, definitely faster than Kuldath. Crit rate and crit damage we're not concerned about. Debuff resistance we're not concerned about because we're not going to be resisting any of Kuldath's debuffs. We're just going to be avoiding them completely. And lastly, debuff accuracy 167. Not great for general content, but fine for Kuldath since Scyl's debuffs can't be applied to him anyway. On to Scyl's masteries. So here you see the offense tree is exactly the same as the other characters that we covered. So I'm just going to talk about some of the differences in the support tree. So here I have Spirit Haste, and this is important for her. So when someone dies, she gets a speed boost, which is really important. Now no one should die, but just in case, she gets that +8 bonus to speed. And next, Sniper. This is in general good for her. Now it does not work with her stun, but it does work with her decreased speed debuff on her A1. So in general, this is another good one to get, even though it's not really relevant for Kuldath. Now, why we did go down the left side of the support tree is for increased healing. So here we have Lay on Hands, increases the value of heals the champion casts by 5%. So with her passive, she's casting it at the start of every turn. So now we get increased healing for everybody, including her. And next we have Healing Savior, increases the amount of healing and the value of shield buffs placed by this champion by 10% if the target ally has 40% HP or less. So once again, increasing that passive healing from Scyl to herself and everybody else. Alright guys, on to Visix. Now she is going to be our secondary provoker. As I said, we need to control this boss with provokes, but one provoker is not good enough. There's always that fail chance even if you have enough accuracy. So in my opinion, it's best to bring a secondary provoker. And Visix is going to be our provoker. So I did a champion guide on her recently as well as Grush. So if you guys are interested, I will leave a link in the description below. So we're primarily using Visix as a backup provoker. So this A3 is a really good AoE provoke, but it's only for one turn. So great for the waves, but once again, we don't actually need it to be more than one turn because we are only using it when Jizoh's provoke is on cooldown. Okay, so only when Jizoh needs it. When that relentless set does not proc, then we're going to use this backup provoke from Visix. So Visix does have a great A2, which is an AoE decreased speed. Now unfortunately, decreased speed does not work on the boss, but nevertheless this is great for waves. Plus she does have that allied protection, so if needed, if Jizoh is getting low on health because of those attacks, because of that 2-turn provoke of his, then she can come in with this and at least absorb some of the damage from Kuldath. Now this A1 is great as well. Decreased turn meter works on so many bosses. Not Kuldath though. So unfortunately the A2 and the A3 are not really useful to us once we hit the boss. But we definitely do need that A3, that provoke, when we have Jizoh's skills on cooldown. So does she require books to be used in this comp? Now I would say for her A3, it's not completely required. I mean, you could just run her really fast if you just put 3 speed sets on her and just make her really fast and hopefully sometimes lap over the boss. Then you would not necessarily need to have this A3 booked out. But if you want to run her at a little bit slower speeds, I mean faster than the boss, but more medium speeds, and you want to build her a little bit more tankier, then yes, you will need to book out this A3 to use her in this comp. A 4-turn cooldown is just too much. Now you may get lucky with Jizoh sometimes in certain turns and not have to use her A3 because Jizoh is proccing that relentless and getting those cooldowns, and he just has the provoke job handled by himself. That will happen sometimes, but not all the time. So I would say it's worth it to try to book out Visix A3 because it just requires 1 book to that 3-turn cooldown. Now I know it's pure luck where it lands, but really 1 book required. I think it's worth it to try to book out that A3. It's definitely much more helpful to the comp if she has a 3-turn cooldown for that A3, or else you're gonna have to build her really fast. So how have I geared Visix? So same thing with Scyl. I always try to experiment with different builds. So here's where she's at right now. I have her in a regen set. So just like Scyl of the Drakes, every turn she's getting 15% health back at the start of that turn. But I have her in a frostbite set as well, which is pretty cool because there is a 10% chance upon being hit that she will freeze the attacker. Well, she's throwing out those AoE provokes all the time. When you have her booked out, she's just throwing them out like crazy. So she's always getting hit because she's provoking people, right? So now she has an additional chance to freeze that attacker. So this is definitely a really good combination for her. If you want her to be tankier, also you can put on an additional immortal set instead of that frostbite set. But this is a pretty good build for her for general content. So what about her bottom pieces of gear? So for the glove, I have a defense percentage glove. I'd rather have an HP percentage glove, but after that, defense percentage is okay. HP percentage chest, and lastly for the boot, speed boot. Remember, for these regeneration sets to work, people need to take turns, okay? So the faster she is, the more turns she takes, the more healing that she's getting from these sets. So for your Visix, especially if they have a regen set on, make sure to use a speed boot. So for the accessories, because she is applying those debuffs like decreased speed, she's decreasing the turn meter, plus she's doing that provoke, make sure you have her in an accuracy banner. She needs accuracy to land all those debuffs and the decreased turn meter. On to Visix's total stats. So here we have her at 41,000 health, which is pretty good. Attack is not relevant. Defense 4,300, so really good defense number. Speed 200, so 25 faster than the boss. Crit rate, crit damage, we're not focused on that, but not bad at 50% and 140%. Debuff resistance were not needed for this boss, but 175. And lastly, we do have that accuracy at 318. So the boss's resistance at floor 100 Hard Doom Tower is 330. But even with this accuracy, we are gonna land that provoke debuff most of the time. It would be better if this was higher, but with the gear that I have, it's difficult to make it higher. But right now, it's gonna work most of the time. So this 318 is pretty good. All right, on to Visix's Masteries. So you see the offense tree is exactly the same as the other characters. Pretty good. We have that War Master, we have that Life Drinker. But for the support tree here, we do have lasting gifts. So she does put on that ally protection with her A2. So lasting gifts gives us that potential to increase that ally protection to 3 turns. Not really necessary, but not a bad choice. And we have Master Hexer here. So here she's going to put on that decreased speed debuff AoE with her A2. So this is going to increase it from 2 turns to potentially 3 turns, which is really good for waves and for certain bosses as well, but not for Kuldath. So this is primarily for that A2 for who it does affect. Really good for waves, like I said, certain bosses, not for Kuldath. So once again, this is optional as well, not needed for this boss. So what are some other choices for a secondary provoker? Let's say you haven't been playing the game long enough to get Visix yet. Well, this would be a really good choice. He is a rare, he's Sentinel, and on his A1, it's just crazy. Booked, he has an 85% chance to provoke when he gets a crit. So if you build him with crit rate, that A1 has an 85% chance to provoke. That is just crazy. So definitely he can be your backup provoker or even your primary provoker. He has this crazy passive where he just heals himself by 10% of his max health at the start of every turn. So Sentinel is a great option for either a primary or a backup provoker. I don't know why he would necessarily be your primary provoker if you get Jizoh at 14 days anyway. I guess maybe you don't want to invest the books into Jizoh. So this would be a good option, Sentinel, once again, either for that primary provoker role or that secondary provoker role. Another choice for a secondary provoker is Greybeard. So here on his A1 when booked, he has a 70% chance to provoke. So really high chance to provoke. Why he's not the best choice is because of his affinity. So he is actually a poor affinity choice for Kuldath, because here you see the magic affinity compared to the force affinity of Kuldath. So if Greybeard does weak hit, even with that 70% chance to provoke when booked, that debuff will not be transferred over. So he won't get that. But if you don't have any other secondary choices, he could be a good choice. You're just gonna have to live with occasionally weak hitting and not getting that provoke. But still, it is on his A1, so it's not like his skill is gonna be on cooldown anytime. Plus, he does have that A3 where he puts a counter attack and a shield buff on himself. So he would be another option, not optimal because of his affinity, but another option for that secondary provoker. Another good choice for secondary provoker is the Void legendary Angar. So if you've been lucky enough to pull this guy, he would be a really good choice for a secondary provoker. So on his A2, it is an AoE attack. It's a provoke, 100% chance if you have the accuracy. Plus he puts a counter attack buff on himself. And he also puts reflect damage on the whole team. So in and of itself interesting, but it's really his passive that's cool. So when someone attacks him that has been provoked, they have a chance to be re-provoked. So essentially, he has the potential to keep someone provoke locked forever, really. So this is a pretty cool passive. Now, this passive, even booked, does not proc enough for Angar to be your primary provoker, in my opinion. Okay, so I would not count on Angar to be your primary provoker because this passive just doesn't happen enough. Sometimes it will happen multiple times in a row and sometimes it won't happen at all. So you need reliability for that primary provoking spot. And Jizoh has a 2-turn provoke, right? Guaranteed. Sure, Angar could get multiple provokes in a row, but still, once again, it's not good enough. So Angar is good as a secondary provoker. So how does this team work? We have Jizoh with that big 2-turn provoke. His A2 also grants him an extra turn. So that's going to cool down all of his skills. Plus he has that relentless set. So whenever he gets an extra turn, he's also getting that extra cooldown on his skills. We have Grush coming in with those big heals, the leech, the continuous heals. Plus he has that attack down and that crit damage down. We have Khatun coming in with that speed lead. Plus she does that turn meter boost and that increased speed buff. We have Scyl of the Drakes. Every turn she is healing everybody. She's that backup reviver, plus she's great in the waves with that AoE stun. And lastly, Visix, she is that backup provoker, plus she's great in the waves with all her AoEs. So that is going to be the team. How we're going to structure it, basically when Jizoh's skills are on cooldown and we need the boss provoked again, then we're going to use Visix's skills that provoke. It's not going to be all the time, because sometimes for Jizoh, his Relentless will proc, meaning that's going to be an extra cooldown of his skills. So we'll be able to go 2-turn provoke to 2-turn provoke right away. But if not, we got that backup there. So I'm going to start the run on auto, and once we get to about the end of wave 2, I'm going to start to manual to make sure we have all the skills available once we hit that boss Kuldath. So right about this point, when really wave 2 is close to dying, I'm going to start to manual to make sure I'm just using everybody's A1s so all their cooldown skills get replenished. So you saw that freeze there because I have that frostbite set on Visix. So once again, when she provokes people, there's a 10% chance that she's gonna freeze those attackers, which is awesome. Now I can use the A2 here. I don't really care about it being on cooldown because it's not relevant for the boss. So there are certain skills like Scyl's stun or Visix's A2 that I can use, but a lot of the other ones I do want to save for the boss. So whenever possible, I am going to use Khatun's A2 just to speed things up. So Scyl of the Drakes, really I'm using her for her A1 and her passive heal. So if nothing else happens, the stun is not going to affect Kuldath. So that's pretty much why I'm going to use her. So the majority of time with Scyl, I'm just going to be using her A1. So here we have a potential provoke. Now, I do see that Jizoh is a little bit closer to that. Sometimes I will use this A1 because you want to have that backup. Let's say I use the provoke here of Visix and it doesn't work. Well, then Jizoh's going next. And there's that extra chance to provoke, right? So I get another chance at it. But I do think Jizoh can do it. So I am going to use Visix's A1. So this is really what we're using Jizoh for, this A3, okay? So we want that 2-turn provoke, plus he puts that continuous heal on himself, which is great. Like I said, the majority of the time I get that provoke, even though my accuracy is not insanely high with Jizoh. So with Grush, I'll just use any of his skills, whatever is available. So I just continue to run through things. You see that was a big heavy hit from Kuldath, but I have a lot of healing coming through, right? So we have the leech there. We also have the continuous heals, plus we have Scyl of the Drakes. So once again, I said that I'm going to use the A2 of Jizoh after I use the A3 because the A2 gives me an extra turn. So that is an extra cooldown on his skills. So I recommend to start off the match to use that A2 after the A3. So I just put a shield on myself and I also put that counterattack on myself. Like I mentioned, I do lose a turn on those skills because I'm giving myself an extra turn, but it's worth it because I am getting the cooldown, extra cooldown on my skills. So hopefully I get that decrease attack or decrease crit damage. Decrease attack would be better from Grush. There you go. And you see everyone back to full health. Now, if Jizoh was really low here, I could go with the A2 of Visix for that ally protection. But you see, everyone's back to full health, so we're good to go at this point. And we have one more provoke on the boss. So as I mentioned, I'm saving Visix's provoke just in case we need it. So everything is good at this point. I'm saving that provoke. So whenever I can, I am using that A2 just to speed things up for our team. Trying to get that leech from the A1. Just using the A1. Now you see here that Jizoh's skills were still on cooldown as far as his provoke. This is why we bring in a secondary provoker, okay? When his provoke skills are on cooldown. So now I am going to use Visix's provoke just for that one turn. Just enough for Jizoh and his cooldowns to be replenished. That's all I need, that one turn provoke, and we have him controlled. Now Visix can potentially take a lot more damage than Jizoh just because of the affinity. Sometimes Jizoh gets a weak hit and it barely scratches him. Visix isn't going to get any weak hits. Nevertheless, she's pretty tough. So you see, now we have that provoke backup, all right? Perfect timing. So we have that 2-turn provoke. Once again, we're gonna try when the cooldown is there to use the A2 of Jizoh to further cool things down. We haven't had any relentless procs yet, but that would really help us out. But even if it doesn't, that's why we have Visix with her provoke on a 3-turn cooldown. For that in-between time, just in case the relentless on Jizoh does not proc. So basically, we're gonna run through this whole run the same way. I'm gonna put this on fast forward for you guys. Alright guys, there you go. The most difficult Magma Dragon. Floor 100 hard Doom Tower with login champs only. 100% free. Alright guys, that is it for today. I hope this video has been helpful to you so you can get through that Doom Tower to get to your rewards. So if you guys haven't yet, like and subscribe, and I will see you in next video.